Hello, and welcome back to Viva La Action, the action movie podcast where we're talking all things action movies, from the good, bad, and underrated. My name is Santi, and with me as always is my co-host, Grayson.
Hello, that's me.
You made me laugh.
I did. I was boogieing.
You were doing a little dancey dance.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm a little bit sniffly.
Oh, that's okay. He's not snorting
cocaine.
Yeah. He's just got the sniffles.
I do got the sniffles.
Get that post-nasal drip.
And I can hear myself because I'm wearing my headphones for once, and I hate it.
Yeah.
So if you hear me talking weird, that's why. Some updates this week.
Yep.
I can't do this. I had to take the headphones off. So we uploaded our very first YouTube video.
Yeah, we did.
This week, and it's doing very well. Last I checked, it had like 600 something views.
What in the fuck?
I don't know.
Are we doing something?
I think we're doing okay, but for the most part, people have been very pleasant. So
that's good. That's good.
Thank you to everyone who has listened on YouTube. You have all been very sweet. The comments have been very encouraging to read. There was one guy who was mildly annoyed about the way I rated Triple R, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, you know what?
Whatever.
To be honest, I don't hate what he said because I understand what he's trying to say. I disagree, but it's fine. I'm not going to dive too much into it. If you want to check that out, we are Viva La Action podcast on YouTube. Not all of our episodes are up there yet. By the time this goes out, it'll just be, I think, the first two.
Is that both the long episodes and short episodes?
No. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the short episodes just for the podcast feed. So
gotcha.
It'll be like a little bonus if you listen to us on like Apple or Spotify or something like that. But if you just listen on YouTube, then you'll just get the longer episodes bi-weekly. So maybe a little, if you're hurting for our beautiful tones every other week, then we'll have mini episodes that go up on the podcast feed. Also, if you're listening to this on YouTube, we do have a podcast feed, so you can go listen to it on there, and it's pretty cool. Yeah,
there's some little short podcasts that we do talk about just random bullshit.
Yeah, just whatever.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. So, speaking of things that are fun, something that I always find fun is rating and reviewing a podcast.
Yeah,
which you should do if you're listening to 100%,
this. 100%. Yeah.
And I don't have a good number in my but if someone were to rate us, how many stars should it be?
Man, there's so many good numbers out there, but I think in terms of like star ratings, I think my favorite number just so happens to be 5. There's no correlation there really, but yeah, I think 5 stars really is just the prime number to give.
I think so.
A podcast.
I think so, and I think if you don't rate us 5 stars, I'm gonna invade your island planet and steal the plans to your super weapon and kill your dad.
Whoa. Good segue.
Oh, speaking we watched a movie this week.
Oh, we sure fucking did.
It's funny because like I think this is our first actual like big like American blockbuster.
Yeah.
Which is I think if you're like listening to this podcast expecting like what you think of as action movies, you might be surprised that we don't talk about them as often as you think. But no, so this is our first big American action movie. It was directed by Gareth Edwards. Shout out. He previously to this had directed 2014's Godzilla. And before that, he directed a film called Monsters, which is, we'll talk about later because I watched it this week. The film is starring Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Donnie Yen, Zhang Wen, Riz Ahmed, Mads Mikkelsen, Forrest Whitaker, Darth Vader, a bunch of little guys.
Darth Vader is real.
He is real.
That's why it stars him.
Right behind you.
Yeah. Watch out.
Watch out. But before we get into the plot and the themes and all that good stuff, what did you think of it?
So I've seen this movie before.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. It's so good. Mm-hmm. It honestly might be it's probably the best Star Wars movie I've ever fucking seen. Mm-hmm. It is so goddamn good. And like it's a like episode 3 is a close second for me. But like Rogue One, man, I don't know what the hell they put in that movie, but it is crack. It's so good.
Well, so we'll talk about it because we are wading into the famously dangerous minefield that is Star Wars.
Yes.
But I wanted to talk about it for a bunch of reasons, which we'll get into. But I just wanted to say, like, I think I'm with you. Where if I think about like all the Star Wars movies, like, this is probably the one that I go back to the most because I think it's the, I don't know. There's just something about like,
yeah.
I think we'll talk about like tone and theme and stuff, but like for me, like I think this hits the perfect note of like what I want out of a Star Wars movie. Like it's sincere, but it's also like dark and it's funny and it's like, it's riveting, and I think, like, you know, we might touch a little bit on... we're not going to dive too deep into, like, Star Wars in general, because I kind of want to, like, look at this as just, like, a movie, as opposed to, like, a Star Wars movie, but I think in terms of, like, where it stands in the canon, like, I don't know, I can't think... Besides something like Empire Strikes Back, I can't think of another Star Wars movie that is so... like brutal and visceral and has such like tangible stakes in it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with this movie is that it shows, because like up until this point, like we had, you know, the original trilogy, the GOATs, we had the sequels, and I don't think the prequels, and I don't think any of the sequels had come out yet, right?
Yeah, Force Awakens had.
Oh, Force Awakens. Okay.
Yeah.
And with all of those, right, like, yeah, there's stakes or whatever, but everybody generally lives.
Right.
In this movie, spoiler if you haven't seen it, everyone, like, pretty much dies.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like all the main characters that we see from the beginning, they're all dead.
Yeah.
Right? They get nuked. And so it's this side of Star Wars that is, like, it's kind of like this, like, hey, just remember, like, people died during this time, and nothing was, like, always, like, happy, and the good guys didn't always win.
Right.
Right. And so it's a good, like, just slap in the face.
Yeah. So, before we get into most of the major stuff, let's instead of doing, like, a full plot rundown, because I think that could get kind of tedious. We'll just do like a brief overview of kind of what the movie's about, and then we'll just let the conversation flow from there. But
we'll shoot the shit.
If you haven't seen it before, the basic premise is I believe it's set like a week before A New Hope. So we focus on Jyn Erso, she's a young woman of a vague age.
Yep.
How old is she? Is she 30? Is she 20?
We have no idea.
We don't know.
No clue.
But her dad is an Imperial scientist, so he, against his will, is being forced to create the Death Star, which at this point, most people in the galaxy don't really know what it is. It seems like it's kind of just like a rumor among like the rebellion.
Yeah, it's the Empire's Manhattan's project.
Right. And so Jyn Erso is recruited by the rebellion to get in contact with a man named Saw Gerrera, who is an extremist rebel. And they believe that he has information about the Death Star because he has captured a turned Imperial pilot. Once the plot kind of kicks off, we also meet Cassian Andor, who is a
hottie.
He's a hottie. I think just tiny tangent right up the top.
Yeah.
This might be the hottest Star Wars movie.
Oh, absolutely.
I think everyone,
without a doubt,
a bunch of babes in this one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Felicity Jones, babe. Donnie Yen, babe.
Hottie.
Jung Wen, babe.
Yeah.
Forrest Whitaker, babe.
Yep. Yeah.
That little guy who goes,
Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah.
The ghost of Tarkin, unsettling babe.
CGI'd Leia, undeniably hot.
Yeah. Not their value, but
no, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we meet Cassian. He's a rebel spy.
Yep.
Pulls no punches.
Yep.
His co-pilot is a droid, a reprogrammed Imperial droid named K2SO.
Favorite droid ever.
Best droid.
That's so good.
Easily.
Yeah.
And he's voiced by Opoo. What's his name?
That's not his name, Opoo.
No, his name's not Opoo. He's not a weird Simpsons parody. What the fuck is his name? This is one of the rare times where I didn't take a bunch of notes because most of this is just in my head.
Yeah.
Let me look it up really quick. You distract while I look this up.
Yeah. So yeah, Cassian has his like little pilot friend, and then
Alan Tudyk.
There you go. And he's like trying to because he ends up on a planet, and he's like trying to get information about this pilot and where like Saw Gerrera is. And then it cuts to then like them at the Alliance base where Jin is chatting with the leaders, and they're like, you need to find Saw Gerrera because he has information about something that your father's making. She's like, my father, as far as I know, is dead. I like to think he is anyway.
Right. So from there we meet Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah.
We meet Bodhi, who is the Imperial pilot, played by the great Riz Ahmed.
Yeah, he did a really good job.
He's phenomenal.
He's so good.
I think this might be the boldest statement I've ever made in my life, but
go for it.
I think, and it's funny to say it because this movie made like $1 billion, but I think Rogue One might be one of the most underrated movies of all time because I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough, especially in terms of like just a bunch of stuff. But one of the things I don't think gets talked about enough is that Riz Ahmed just fucking he is so good in this movie. Yeah. Like there's so many moments where he like is just like selling it, and it's just like, I'm like, dude, were you going for an Oscar?
Like what? Like the whole time he was in the ship while they were on Scarif.
Yes.
Like that whole part, just phenomenal. He like it just.
And he's a great actor. He has been nominated for an Oscar at this point.
Oh, really? Nice.
He did a movie called Heavy Metal, it's The Sound of Metal.
Okay.
Where he plays a heavy metal drummer who's going deaf.
Oh.
And it's kind of like about his like journey through that, and he's very good in that. I think he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Okay.
And he's actually won an Oscar now because he produced a short film last year that I can't remember the name of, but it won Best Narrative Short.
Oh shit!
At the Oscars. So
hell yeah.
Yeah, he's just a powerhouse, and he's great.
So good.
He's very English in this.
Yes. Yeah.
So we meet Bodhi while they're on Jeddah, which is the desert planet. We also meet Chirrut Imwe, who is played by Donnie Yen.
Legend.
And we meet Baze Malbus, who's played by Jung Wen. Both very, very famous Chinese actors. I think Donnie Yen has, at this point, you could call him just a famous actor because I think he translates into America very well.
Yes.
But Jung Wen, this is the first thing I've seen with him in it. I looked him up. He's done like hundreds of movies, but I haven't seen very many of them.
Yeah.
He usually plays like a tough guy, like
right.
Like cop or something like that in mainland China movies. But he plays Baze in this, and I think again an underrated performance. Like I think he's so funny. Yeah. Like I really buy his character as this like cynical like. We'll talk about Chirrut and Baze in a little bit because I want to go into a full discussion on them. But both good. I think they're great additions to this movie.
Yeah.
Once the characters leave Jeddah, they go to a planet that I can't remember the name of, where Jin's dad is.
Edu.
Edu. Yes, and Jin is like there because she wants to like rescue her dad. Her dad's being interrogated by director Krennic, who is played by Ben Mendelsohn, also great.
Also fantastic.
I think he's the first Australian Imperial we've seen.
Nice.
Because most of them are like English.
Yeah.
But for some reason he's Australian. They just don't explain it. But you know what? It's fine.
It's whatever. It's Star Wars. It's fake.
Yeah, it's Star Wars. It doesn't matter. And then Jin's dad gets killed.
Yeah.
But she is given the message that there is a weakness in the Death Star, and the plans are on Scarif. So from there's a little bit of stuff that happens in between, but from there it's basically this mad dash to get the Death Star plans. And like you said, the film ends with pretty much everybody dying. But yeah, that's the basic plot if you haven't seen the film. Which, if you haven't seen Rogue One at this point, it's been out for 7 years now. Almost 7.
7 years?
2016. Yep.
I thought that bitch came out in like 2018.
Nope. 2016.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, because Force Awakens was 2015, Rogue One 2016, Last Jedi 2017, Solo 2018, Rise of Skywalker 2019.
That's right. Time needs to slow the hell down.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right.
But yeah, so that's the plot of the film. I watched a bunch this week of like behind the scenes stuff. And I listened to some like interviews with the director and the cast and stuff, but if you're not overly familiar with Star Wars like production history, Rogue One was supposed to be the first of 3 spin-off films. So when George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, their plan was they would do 3 sequel films. So episodes 7, 8, and 9. And then in between those, they were going to do 3 spin-offs. So originally it was going to be Rogue One, which was the movie that we're talking about today, and then it was going to be Solo, and then I believe it was going to be Boba Fett. There was going to be a Boba Fett solo film.
Oh, okay.
That one did not end up happening. The main reason being that the director left. It was originally going to be James Mangold, who's doing the new Indiana Jones.
Oh, okay.
And then a whole bunch of stuff happened. Star Wars is like at this point very notorious for like firing directors and like doing all kinds of stuff. So this is kind of this weird. It sits in this weird place in the canon where like it was supposed to be the start of this like new era of Star Wars where we're like exploring different parts of the galaxy and like seeing different stories from like different perspectives outside of the main trilogy. And I think like as like a solo movie, I don't think they could have picked a better like story. Because I just think it just fucking rules.
It's so good. Yeah, well, and it provides context for like how the Alliance got the plans in the first place. Because when up until it got released, we just kind of assumed that they somehow got their hands on it. We never really got the full story because they just were like, oh, yep, we have the plans and here's the weakness. And we didn't know like, why would they build that weakness? How did that happen? And this is like, oh, here's why it has that weakness and here's how they got it. Right. And I think in addition to that, what I like about it is that like it gives you this perspective that Star Wars hadn't at this point hadn't given us, which was the ground level. Yeah.
You know, like, especially if you're talking just about the movie. Like, I'm not going to talk about the TV shows or, you know, the cartoons or anything like that. But if we just look at the movies, right? All 6 of the movies up to that point had focused on a Jedi, right? So, original trilogy, we looked at Luke Skywalker. And the prequel trilogy, we were focused on Anakin Skywalker, right? And, you know, they're both, like, the best person in the galaxy. You know, they're the whatever. And what I liked about this movie was... it's the first Star Wars movie that feels like a war.
Yeah.
You know, and it feels like it really gives you the idea in this one that like the rebels are truly like a rebellion. And, you know, as always, they keep what the Empire is kind of vague. Like you don't really get a sense of why people would not like the Empire, but you do get the sense that like you get a better like overall view of the rebellion. Like I like that they're not just this like fighting force that like rivals the Empire, you know, like they go out of their way in this movie to show that like it's this tiny group of people. There's infighting in the rebellion, like they're underfunded.
They
like
got shitty equipment,
like breaking equipment, like and I think like one of the most interesting things it does is like it kind of like grays, like blurs the lines a little bit. You know, like in A New Hope, it's like very clear, like like Empire bad, rebellion good, right?
Yeah.
But we have a character like we have like Cassian in this, who is like his introduction in this movie is him shooting an informant. Yeah. Just like he's like, all right, well, you gotta die, and just murks him. Right, and it's like we had never seen anything like that before. Right, you know, like the closest you get is like Han Solo shooting that guy in the bar, but like that's like way different.
But that is because he's a smuggler, right? It's established that like Han Solo is like this seedy like douchebag guy, and up until like he meets Obi-Wan and Luke, like he had no pay or whatever in the rebellion, right? He was like, I don't give a shit, I'm just trying to make money. And then he just kind of gets roped into it. But like Cassian is full blown rebel. And he's just like, well, all right, I got my information. You die now.
And I don't know. I'm not one of those people who thinks like Star Wars needs to be like necessarily like brutal and violent for me to enjoy it. Like I think that Star Wars can be like multifaceted. You know, like, but what I do like is that this movie took a different direction and was like let's show like what happens when, you know, your main characters are willing to die for their cause. And I think one of the smart things this movie did, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over, but like, I think one of the smart things it did was it gave us a whole new cast of characters that could die, right? Because we never know about them in any other canon. Like, you know, they don't have names in the original trilogy. They don't show up in comic books or anything like that. So they had this opportunity to like build some real stakes. And I think you feel that throughout the movie. Like there's like even rewatching it, which I did this week, like there were still moments where I was like, oh, anyone could die at any moment, you know, like, and I just think that's wonderful.
It is. There's so many close calls. And like by the end of it, I'm like sweating bullets. Man. And I knew what was coming because I'd seen this before, but I was still like, oh boy, oh, they're going to lose. They're not going to get it. Oh, they're so fucked. And it's so good because of that. Because like, and all the other Star Wars, right? Like A New Hope, right? There's a little tension when they're like fighting at the Death Star trying to hit that exhaust port. But Luke's the one who does it because he has the Force and he's the like canonically the strongest Jedi ever, right? And so we like kind of knew it was going to happen, right? And it's like, yeah, hurrah, we did it. But in this, it was like, oh damn, if they don't get this, that's it for the rebellion. So,
and I like too that like I don't know if I like it, but one of the things I appreciate about this movie that's very strange is there's just so many moments that just made me burst into tears. And I don't know what it is, but like they do a really good job in this movie of like building to moments. Like there's, not to jump to the end, but like the end fight, like the moment where there's so many good moments, but
yeah,
there's this moment where, you know, they've started the, like, you know, the deception, right? Like where they're like blowing up like all these like things to try and get all the characters, or to get all the stormtroopers on the other side of the base. And there's that moment where the like the guy in the like rebel base is like listening, and he's just like, he just stands up and he starts running.
Yep.
And he's like they've, you know, there's enemy activity on Scarif, and he's like, you know, they're like, we're gonna go like reinforce them. And there's that moment where like the whole rebel fleet arrives, and they hear it over the radio, and they're like, reinforcements or whatever. I just fucking cried.
Oh,
and I don't know why, but it's just like,
it's what, there's a line, and I think it's what is part of that driving force that makes you cry, is that rebellions are built on hope.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That because we see, you know, before they go to Scarif, right, Jyn Erso had like pitched this whole thing about like, we need to go to Scarif because that's where the plans are, and like most of the rebels were like, why are we taking the word of you, whose father is an actual imperial scientist?
Right.
We have no idea if your information's good. Right? But there were still some rebels that were like, yeah, we'll fucking go with you. We'll fight. Yeah. Right? Because we believe in that cause. And if there's any amount of hope that is true, then there's a way out of this war. Yeah. And so they go, and it's like a handful of people, right? Yeah. And they're fighting with basically nothing. Yeah. And so when that fleet shows up, because, there's fighting on Scarif and we got to go support our friends, then it's like, okay, yeah, that gets me, because now there's a little bit of hope, and we can kind of see that, okay, maybe they can squeeze out a win here. Yeah, and I like... I want to take a step back just a little bit, because I feel like I've jumped all the way to the end. But that's okay. Just to take a step back a little bit, I was talking about, like, I like that they diversify a little bit, like, what the rebellion looks like. Yes. And I love that they introduce in this movie the idea that there's the rebellion, which is this, like, organized, like, council of, like, people and armies. And then there's, like, people who are just out there fighting. Yeah. And Saw Gerrera, like, he's a character we keep seeing over and over and over again in Star Wars, but what I like about it, like his introduction in this movie, if you hadn't known that he was a Clone Wars character or anything like that, I like that they show him, like, at the end of his life, where he has been fighting for so long, and he's like, he thinks of himself as like the last, like, stand, you know? And we see that he's just this, like, broken, like, you know, barely any human parts left, like, you know, and I think some criticism gets thrown at Forrest Whitaker for his, like, very weird, like, portrayal of Saw. But I think what I like about it is that, like, he acts like someone who all he's known for, like, 50 years is just war. Yeah. You know? Yeah, he's never done a moan of peace. He's never had any peace. Like, and I like that he's just, like, suspicious of everyone, and that his, like, little band of extremists is, like, they're just, like, mean. Yeah. And they're, like, they'll kill anyone. Yeah. And, like, they have their weird squid lie detector monster. We'll kill him. I love Forrest Whitaker. I think he did a fantastic job. He's great. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I do love that they show him at the end of his life, and so before seeing, I hadn't seen the Clone Wars animated series before seeing Rogue One. Right. So when Saw Gerrera popped up, I didn't really, like, understand who he was, and I didn't understand why, like, some people were like, oh my god, that's so cool, they got Saw Gerrera in here. And then I watched the Clone Wars animated series, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. And I do really think that they did a good job of, like, portraying somebody who has just, like, been through so much shit, right? Because that I think that is how somebody like that would act. Yeah. Right? They would be so broken, and they would just keep going, and if they didn't have that, they wouldn't know what to do. Yeah. And I think Forrest Whitaker did a really, really great job of that. And I think, because they could have, like... Because after the Clone Wars, right, they could have just had Saw just, like, fuck off and go into hiding.
Right.
Yeah. But because originally he was just, like, all about, like, defeating the Separatists and all that kind of crap. And so then when the Empire rose, you know, they could have been like, oh, yeah, he just got tired and he doesn't want to fight anymore. No. He's going to keep going.
Yeah. And I don't know, I just love his, like, design.
Yeah.
Like, he's got, like, these, like, cobbled together, like, legs, and he's got the weird, like... Because he's sort of... I got the sense that he's kind of supposed to be this, like, antithesis to, like, Darth Vader.
Yes.
Where, you know, Darth Vader is this being who's held together by, like, you know, rage and the Force and hate. And Saw Gerrera is, like, the same, right? He's, like, this being who... He's just driven to just destroy the Empire. You know, he hates it so much. But he doesn't have, you know, Force powers. He's just a guy.
Yeah.
And so he's got this, like, horrible breathing apparatus. And he's, like... He's got, like, Albert Einstein hair and, like... And again, I get that his performance is weird. But what I like about it is, like... You get the sense that he's lost his mind. That he's just like, he doesn't know anything but violence anymore. And
well, and you bring something up which I didn't notice the first time I watched this. That breathing apparatus. There's a moment where Bodhi is brought before Saw, and they're like talking, and then there's like a pause in the conversation, and Saw pulls off that mask, and breathes. And it doesn't sound like Vader's respirator.
Right.
But it's pretty damn close.
Yeah.
And you can tell that as he's using that, Bodhi's having flashbacks.
Yes.
Because there's a good possibility that Bodhi has been at least in the same vicinity as Vader. And that just breathing makes anybody shit their pants.
I think, and what's cool about that, too, then, is, like... There's subtext there where then Bodhi would see it as like, oh shit, like I'm on the other side of a coin, you know, like this is I'm just with the same dude,
same dude, different
flavor, you know,
right?
And I love, I don't know, like the whole Jeddah, like part of the movie, I think is wonderful.
Oh, it's great,
and it takes a lot of inspiration from like Afghan war movies, so like, you know, it reminds me a lot of like Zero Dark 30 or like The Hurt Locker and stuff like that. Like
all movies I've never seen in my life.
It's okay. I mean, I think there was definitely this period in like the early 2000s, like post 9/11, where we were like obsessed with like valor movies, and, like war movies. Even
with like TV, because I'm rewatching NCIS. And like the first like 2 seasons, it's all about the fucking war in the Middle East and all this kind of stuff, and we were obsessed with it
because this movie, it takes a lot of inspiration from a lot of stuff that isn't Star Wars. Because like the Scarif stuff is very reminiscent of like Apocalypse Now and like Vietnam era like war films. But what I like about the Jeddah stuff is it like it uses that imagery, but it gives you this perspective of like the other side, if that makes sense. And I think for me, like one of the best scenes in this movie, and I think it's one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars, is that moment where Jyn and Cassian are like, they're in that like town square, and Cassian says something like, "This town's about ready to blow." And Jyn is like looking around, and there's these small quick shots of like people running across like, you know, scaffolding, and like you see the whole, you know, this ambush being set up. And then there's the moment where the guy just pulls the pin on the grenade
and goes
for it. And I think that whole scene is like I said before, it's the first time I remember watching a Star Wars movie and being like, oh shit, like this is a war, you know? And you feel like tense because there's like civilians, like you know, you see like people running for cover, and you see like Saw's rebels like just shooting whoever, and it's like
there's like a kid out just in the middle crying,
and it's like I don't know, that whole scene, every time I watch it, I'm just like it's in awe. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah, because in every other Star Wars, a Star Wars movie, because I'm not going to try to talk about the animated TV shows, because that also shows pretty good, like, it was a war.
Yeah.
In all the other movies, right, we're told that it's a war, but we're following these like big heroes, these main characters, and there's a lot more bureaucratic stuff that happens, and these really tense, high stakes fights between two very powerful people. We don't really ever get to see the troops on the ground or in the streets or whatever fighting for this cause. We just see the big heroes doing their hero thing.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I think one of the nice things I like about this movie is, and it's something that I've had disagreements with other Star Wars fans about, but to me,
you got it.
This is very controversial, but
it's fine.
I think my favorite Star Wars stuff doesn't have Jedi in it. And I could be, like way off, like, whatever, but to me, Star Wars has always been the most interesting when it's like the Force is like there and it's like this, nebulous kind of thing. And maybe there's a Jedi on the perimeter or something like that. Right. But I like when there are these stories about people who they got no fucking clue, like, what, and they're just trying to survive in this horrible galaxy.
Yeah.
And I think the really interesting thing this movie did, and I'm trying not to geek out too much on like Star Wars lore or anything like that, because I don't want to lose our non-Star Wars listeners, but I love the introduction of Chirrut and Baze as these guys who are like, they're Force adjacent, right? Like they're Jedi adjacent, where Chirrut especially is like, he's not a Jedi, right? No. Like he can't Force push someone or like read your mind or whatever, but he's this guy. And the dog just did a big stretch.
Yeah.
He's this guy who, and I was watching in the behind the scenes, Donnie Yen said that he was described as like a warrior monk, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of like, almost like a Shaolin monk, like and they're these guys who they tell you in this movie that they protected this ancient Jedi temple, and they're these guys who have spent their whole life around like the Jedi religion, but are not Jedi themselves.
Right. And they're connected to the Force in a very interesting way.
Interesting and different way. Yeah. And I like that Chirrut like embodies this thing that we haven't seen in Star Wars before, where he's a monk, and he practices Jedi religion. But he's not a Jedi.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, we only see the Force come up when it's like on one end of the spectrum, right? Like it's a Jedi or it's a Sith or it's a guy who doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
So it's fun to see like someone who believes in the Force and is, practicing these like Force things, but isn't a Jedi, And it's like, and I just love him so much. He's one of my favorite Star Wars characters.
Yeah. He's just he's funny.
Yes.
Because there's the fight in the town square where he's doing his fight with his stick.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's very good.
This is also, I really like this because we see not a Force wielder, but somebody who's connected to the Force not use a lightsaber.
Right.
And not, he uses the Force in a very interesting way because he's blind. Right. He's fully blind. So he, instead of using the Force to manipulate objects or others or stuff like that, he just uses it as just this like energy that allows him to see without having to see.
Right.
And there's this great moment where he like grabs a stormtrooper, right, has him in like a headlock, and then stabs this other one in the toe, and he just goes, "How's your foot?" I was like, this dude, man.
And so I looked a lot for if anybody would say this, but I couldn't find an interview where somebody like put this out there. But to me, he feels inspired by this character called Zatoichi, who he's a blind swordsman that was in a bunch of Japanese films in like the 60s and 70s, I want to say. Maybe even into the 80s. He did like 20-something films. But
Lord.
His characterization feels very similar to me, where he's this like he's like very deadly and very dangerous and like, you know, very like, you know, wise, but he's also like, hey, you know, he's like, I'm having fun, you know?
Yeah, he's cracking jokes.
And there's that great joke where they put the blindfold on him and he's like, are you kidding me? I'm blind.
Right. I was watching this and my roommate Lissa was in the room and we both like almost simultaneously went, it's like Toph vibes from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
Right? Because all the time Toph would just be making these just like blind jokes.
Yeah.
And making people around her like feel like shit, but she was like, it's funny.
Yeah. And
right?
that is weirdly and I feel like, because in one of the behind the scenes things, Donnie Yen actually said that was his idea for Chirrut to be blind.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I like that because it is actually like this kind of trope in like martial arts and samurai films of having like a blind warrior. Yeah. And them just being so good that like they don't even have to see. And so I think his characterization is really good. And I like his relationship with Baze too, where Baze is almost like this guy. Like, you know, he's got to follow him around to make sure he doesn't get killed. Yeah. But I also get the sense that like they love each other, and not in like necessarily like a romantic way, but they're just like they're all they have, you know, is each other. And that Baze is almost like he's like, you know, because they're both guardians of the will, but I get the sense that Baze is almost like, that was my job.
Right,
you know?
I was just trying to make a paycheck.
And he doesn't really believe in all that stuff.
Right.
Until, like, the big moment where Chirrut dies.
Yeah.
And then there's the other moment that makes me cry where Chirrut is dying and Baze, you know, lays him to rest, and then Baze has like his last stand, and he's got his gun, and he's like, you know, and he's saying, you know, I'm one with the Force is with me. Yep. Yeah, I just love those two. Like, I think there's such a good addition to this movie that.
And there's always these moments where like Baze will be like, oh, you almost died. And Chirrut will just be like, oh, I had the Force. Yeah. And Baze is like, no, you had me. And they're just their relationship is just so good.
It is.
They might be my favorite like duo in Star Wars, because like you said, like they're all they have, and it's clear that there's like this very strong brotherly connection.
Yeah, bond. And I think, I don't know, this movie does a lot of things well. And I want to touch on something slightly different just while we're just running around. But I think one of the things this movie does really well is scale. Yeah. And I think it does a good job of like giving you a sense of like, and I think you lose it a little bit in later movies, especially like the sequels. I think this movie gives you a good sense of like how big everything is. Yeah. Or how small, or like. Yeah. And I think a good example is talking about Baze and Chirrut. There's that moment where they're holding down that landing pad. Yeah. And you see the AT or the AT-AT come through the smoke. Oh, God. And Chirrut is like, Baze, run. Yep. And I think that's the first time, like even in Empire Strikes Back when you first see them, I think that's the first moment where you see one and you're like, oh fuck.
Oh shit. Yeah, because in Empire they're scary. Yeah. But they're like, there's just these big lumbering, slow, essentially cannons on legs, right? They're just like moving slow, they're firing these big shots. It's like, damn, that kind of sucks because they're hard to take down. But in this movie, when I first saw it, I had chills. I was genuinely afraid because it just like comes out of the smoke I don't even know, it's like a tiger or something out of the fucking mist, and you're like, damn. Right. It's like that scene in Jurassic Park, right, where the guy's like hiding and he like turns and there's the Velociraptor like right there, and he's like, clever girl, and then just like gets eaten. Yeah. Right. I was like, damn, clever girl.
No, but I think one of the things the director, I said before he directed Godzilla from 2014, which it's not my favorite Godzilla movie. I think it doesn't lean on the actual monsters enough, but one of the things he does in that movie, and he also does it in his debut called Monsters, is he gives you a good sense of scale by where he puts the camera.
Yes.
And I know that sounds strange, but like if you think about a director like J.J. Abrams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in Force Awakens, like his camera is never like on the ground. Like it's always flying through the air or like following, you know, alongside people.
Yeah.
But what I like about the way Gareth Edwards directs is like he always puts the camera in like an interesting place.
Yeah.
But like, you know, talking about like the AT-AT shot, right? Like a lesser director maybe would have put that like far away to give you a sense of scale, but what he does is he puts it right there next to Chirrut, and so you're looking up at the AT-AT and you feel the scale of it, you know, like, and there's another great shot where they like, it's earlier in the film where they put the disc into the Death Star, and you see it from like the window of a Star Destroyer.
Oh yes. Yes.
And so what's cool about that is then there's like Star Destroyers next to the Death Star, and you get the sense of how big that thing is.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh man.
Yeah.
That's a great, you know.
It is. I
just like the way he uses the camera. I think it's interesting.
It's very interesting, and I didn't even realize that, because even like with J.J. Abrams like going to like Star Trek, those movies. Like I didn't even realize, but most of those shots are just like following, or they're like up in the air, or just like following a ship,
crane shots and stuff like that. And I think because there was a little, I know with this movie, like behind the scenes when they did reshoots, they actually got a different guy to do like some of the reshoots. So it's actually the guy he's the showrunner on Andor, which is the prequel series. And he's also very good. I think he's one of the writers on the film. So his sensibility, I think, is great. But what I think Gareth Edwards is really good at is like just that scope, like just the like, you know, maybe he's not so good at the human stuff. And I think you could argue that, especially in Godzilla. But I think what he's good at in this movie and in Godzilla is good at giving you like that like fear about like how destructive things can be. You know, like even like Baze's gun is like devastating, you know?
It's terrifying.
It's scary, right? And it's like there's more, I don't know. This movie, more than any of the other Star Wars movies, I just feel like, all that looks like it could hurt.
Well, like the whole, I want to go back to the fight with Chirrut, right? In the town square. There are so many moments where like he uses his stick to hit a stormtrooper, and you can see the helmet shatter. Right? You can see pieces of the helmet fly off. And we're so used to, in Star Wars, seeing these stormtroopers or clone troopers or whatever get shot or stabbed with a energy weapon, right? Whether that be a blaster, lightsaber, whatever. And so we see the armor get penetrated and it's charred. But I sometimes forget that these armor pieces aren't just like cloth or whatever. It's like made of like hard plastic or metal or something. It's some Star Wars whatever. And so when he hits these stormtroopers in the head or whatever with his stick and pieces fly off, during that whole fight, I'm just going, ooh, oh, fuck, right? Because he's hitting these people so damn hard. Right? And killing them in one blow with a stick. Right?
Or knocking them out.
Or knocking them out, whatever. But it is just, it's brutal. I think, little off topic, the funniest hit in this whole movie, they're in Scarif. It's Jin, Cassian, and Kay. And they've broken into where all the plans are. And there's that guy working at the desk, and he says something, and Kay's like trying to like come up with a lie, and the Imperial dude's like, I gotta call this in. And he's like, oh, and Kay's like, oh well, and just bonks him on the head. It's like the most comedic thing ever, and it's so funny.
I think Kay, because they've they've had a few sassy droids,
Yes.
right? Like
3PO, obviously.
3PO, and there's the one in Solo whose name I can't remember.
Oh yeah.
Even BB-8. Like,
Oh,
whatever.
100%.
But
R2D2 obviously
yes,
as well.
I think K is the only one that like really carries the like sarcasm really well.
Yes.
And he has so many moments that like even in the theater I just remember laughing out loud. Like
Yep.
He has a great line where he's all and he's I think part of it is Alan Tudyk, the actor.
Yeah.
But part of it is just like his delivery is so good. Like he really lets things hang in the air and like there's a very funny joke where he's like, he wants a blaster.
Yeah.
And Cassian won't give it to him and he's telling him, well, Jin's going to, shoot you or whatever.
Yeah.
He's all, do you want to know the probability of Jin shooting you? And Cassian's like, just get the ship going. He's like, it's high.
It's high.
It's very high.
It's very high, yes. I think my favorite line of his is they're like fighting in the street or whatever, and Jin and Cassian are like cornered in this like alleyway, and there's stormtroopers on all sides, and they're like running through, and Kay finds them, and he's like, whatever, and this like stormtrooper throws a grenade, and Kay picks it up. He like looks at it. Jin and Cassian are like, you have a grenade and it's live. What are you gonna like? You know that, right? And he just like tosses it, and he's like, lots of explosion for somebody. What is it? Is like, lots of explosions for being
incognito
or whatever. And it's just so, and it just like explodes and kills like 5
Well, he doesn't even pick it up; he catches it and then just throws it behind him.
I think the greatest thing about Kay and the reason he's so funny is because he's a droid, right? There's no like expressions that you can like play off of. It's just all deadpan.
Yeah,
and and like just the tone, because he's a droid, just makes it that much funnier. Yeah,
and I think they like, I don't know, and just his physique I think is really interesting. Like he's one of the most interesting looking droids.
Yes.
He's just this big lanky, like, he looks like me, he's all torso and just long arms.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the things they do too that like they humanize him enough that when he dies, like you really feel for him, because if he was just a dick, it'd be like, who cares? Yeah. But I like that he's like, by the end, you're like, yeah, like go Kay, and then you're all, no,
Kay. Yeah.
He has another funny line where he's like, they're like trying to get through the Imperial shield.
Oh yeah.
And Bodhi's like, if it fails, we'll crash and we'll die in the cold dark vacuum of space. And Kay's like, I won't die. I can survive in space.
Yep. Yeah.
This movie, I just want to touch on something really quick.
Yeah.
This movie has one of my favorite things. Well, it's two of my favorite things in like space movies, but also in like war movies.
Yeah.
Where there's like a patrol of like pilots, right? So there's like all the like X-Wing pilots.
Yeah.
And they do like the call in.
Yeah.
And they're like, Red 1 checking in, 5-2 checking in, whatever. I love that.
It's so good.
I remember one of my favorite internet things that ever happened was I was on this Facebook group, which was like a fan group for like a podcast, and somebody like created a thread, and it was like, "Hey everyone, I'm playing Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Like everybody check in with your call sign," and it was just like hundreds of people being like, Big Beef checking in, Fat One checking in, like. I just thought that was so funny.
That's so good.
But I love, like, anytime they do that in a movie, I always have that little moment where I'm like, yay!
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I do the same shit. It's so good.
Like, Red 5, side by side, or whatever. Yep. It's like, I love it.
Let's go.
But the other thing that they do in this movie that I love is when there's, like, two guys, or there's, like, a squadron of guys, like, flying at something.
Yep.
And, like, one of them doesn't pull up in time.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm coming in too hot! Ah! And they, like, crash.
Yep. Yep.
I love those tropes.
It's so good. So one of my favorite movies is Red Tails.
Yes.
I love airplanes. And I love, like, and I've noticed this, my, like, favorite, like war movies all have, like, the Air Force in them.
Yeah.
Because I am right there with you. I love like the call signs. I love the lingo. It's just you're like, yes, let's go. Right. And yeah, like with Red Tails, it's, you know, if you haven't seen Red Tails,
I have. Ben, you want me to blow your mind really quick?
Yeah.
Red Tails is produced by George Lucas.
No fucking way.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, damn.
Of Lucasfilm fame, of Star Wars fame. The one above all, George Lucas.
George Lucas. Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Huh.
He produced that movie.
That's so cool. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's a good movie.
So
I do like fighter pilot movies.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the new Top Gun. I probably
Neither
should
have
watch it.
I know. My friend, I think you might remember him because he worked at Caps for a little bit. Matt Dunn.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Shout out, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
He saw that movie like
a
1,000,000 times in theaters.
Well, it's the highest grossing movie of last year. So.
Yeah, well, and like 50% of that is from Matt. So.
Yeah, there Yeah, I like fighter pilot movie. I think I have kind of a nuanced stance on war films.
Yeah.
Because I think it's easy for them to fall into the, like, glorification.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's complicated, right? Because, like, there are definitely anti-war films, and there's this movie that's the most horrifying film I've ever seen in my life, and it's called Come and See.
Okay.
It's a Russian war film.
Oof.
Genuinely traumatizing, right? Like, I watched that movie, and then for the next, like, 3 days, I was sad, right? And just, like...
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point of anything? You know, I hate the world and life and whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it is possible to make, like, an anti-war film. And I can understand why people have, like, hang-ups about, like, glorifying war and, like... But on the same token, I think, like, there is something to be said for people being discerning enough to know that, like, what you see on screen's not real.
Yes.
You know, and I'd like to think most people can make that distinction. I'm probably wrong, but...
Right.
Like, I can watch, like, Top Gun and be like, that's... I don't want to suddenly join the Navy, you know?
Right, yeah.
But I think too, something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how I'm sad. No.
Yeah.
This is off topic, but I feel like there's this, like, attitude... I say this at once an episode, but I feel like there's, like, people make you feel bad for, like, liking stuff and enjoying yourself. Yeah. And I just want, if you're out there listening and you have, like, because I'm this way, right? Where, like, I have anxiety about, like, well, I have anxiety in general, but
so same. I take Zoloft for it.
Yeah. But, like, it's okay to, like, enjoy things, right? And, like, you're not a bad person if, like, you like a war film, you know? Because, like, I think for the most part, entertainment is only what you make of it.
Yes.
And if, you know, you watch a movie and it's, like, you know, about, like, I don't know, America kicking Nazi ass or whatever. Right. Like, and you know in your heart that, like, it's probably not real, you know, it's mostly propaganda, whatever. I think it's okay to enjoy stuff. Like, you know, don't feel bad about, like, liking films. I think it's fine.
Just be conscious of, like, what it does do if it is, like, propaganda.
Right.
Right. And just, like, so with NCIS, right, it's obviously propaganda.
Yeah.
Right. But I like it.
Yeah.
I do. I think it's really great. I think it does a really good job of, like, portraying, like, because, like, one of the main characters, Gibbs, he was a war vet, and, you know, he deals with PTSD, right? And I think they do a pretty good job with that. I just watched an episode where this World War II vet comes in, and he's kind of losing his mind because his wife died and all this stuff, and it again portrays a really good picture of, like, how these soldiers deal with PTSD.
Yeah, and I think it's just, like, I don't know, I think it's hard.
It is.
The world is nuanced.
It is.
And that's difficult, but...
Yeah.
Anyway, to get back onto Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah. I wanted to go back. We were talking about how, like, this movie does a really good job of portraying, like, the actual, like, nitty-gritty war part of Star Wars and, like, all these different wars that happened throughout the movies and stuff we see. And I know I said I wouldn't touch on the animated stuff, but there's one episode of Clone Wars that I enjoy so much.
Yeah.
Because and it was something that you said about, like, your favorite moments are when there's no Jedi.
Yeah.
There's an episode in Clone Wars where it focuses on these two clones, and they're in this little town. I can't remember what the town's name was, but they're like searching for something, and we follow these two clones, and they come across this child.
Yeah.
Right, and there's this like clear like language barrier, and they can't really communicate, but they still form this bond through this war. And there's like really no Jedi. Like I think Anakin is in it because they like it's the 501st and they like land. It's either the 501st or whichever one Obi-Wan is in.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't remember. Yeah, it's so good because we get to sit with these clones for a little bit and just see like their perspective on this whole fucking ordeal.
Yeah,
which is a lot more complicated, especially because they're clones. Because they were engineered for this.
Yeah.
Right? And so them having this, like, opinion of, like, oh, yeah, you know, I don't like it, or it's whatever, and I don't want to do this anymore, is very interesting because of them being clones. And so that's, like, one of my favorite episodes of that show.
Yeah. That is a very good show.
Yeah.
I think I want to save some of our Star Wars discourse for when we do, like, one of the mainline Star Wars movies, but I think one of the things that is like not talked about enough is that like I think Star Wars in general is very good.
Damn, you don't say.
I know, it's crazy, but no, but really, I mean, I think like Star Wars gets a lot of shit for its fans, number one, but that like the quality isn't necessarily what people expect. But I do think that like if you ask someone like me who is mostly very forgiving of like the worst Star Wars movies, I really only think there's like 2 or 3 bad ones, right?
Yeah.
And I think even amongst like the TV shows and stuff, for the most part, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You could turn on, you could turn on an episode of Clone Wars and show that to your kid, and they'd be entertained. You know.
Yeah.
And like, it's a mixed bag. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think there's a lot of arguments to be made about like where Star Wars has tripped up and what have you, but I think most of them are just like they're pretty good movies, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who are like our age who they kind of missed like the Star Wars hype, and they're just like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And like it's fine if you don't get it. Like you don't have to like Star Wars,
right?
But
nobody's holding a gun to your head.
Yeah, but I think like for the most part, I think they're fine. Like they're good movies. You can watch them like. And I think you can watch them even not being like a huge Star Wars fan, right? Like we both are.
Oh,
but, so don't get mad at me, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
YouTube, be nice.
Yeah. Please.
But yeah, so I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with that. But yeah, I like Star Wars.
Oh yeah, me too. They're great. Going back to Rogue One, I think the funniest thing about this movie is Rogue One ends, right?
Yes.
And we'll talk about the Darth Vader scene.
Yes.
Because that just was fucked up.
Yes.
But the funniest thing about this whole movie is, so the plans get beamed up to the Alliance then puts it on a little disc, and they're trying to get it on the Tantive 4.
Right.
And they do. And they hand it off to Leia, movie ends.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes later, they come out of hyperspace, pursued by Star Destroyer. Vader boards, finds Leia, and goes, "Where are the plans?" Or yada, yada, yada. And she goes, "I'm on a diplomatic mission from Alderaan." And Vader, in his head, is probably going, "No, you're not. We just fought, like, 20 minutes ago.
Like, I just saw you."
Yeah, I know you're not on a diplomatic mission from Alderaan. You have the hand him over, right? And Leia's just like, I don't know what to tell you, my guy. It's very clear that she's a Skywalker.
Yes,
because that is just
that's an Anakin move.
It is 100% an Anakin move.
Leia is the embodiment of gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think that's just the funniest thing, and I don't know if they intentionally planned that, but that is just like the funniest, because it took me a while to like realize that like right after that movie ends, we jump to episode 4.
Yeah.
And that whole conversation is just the funniest fucking thing. Mm-hmm. It does provide context as to why they're being chased.
Yes.
Right? But the fact that Leia is just boldly, openly lying to one of the strongest Sith that has ever existed is hilarious.
It is very funny. I want to talk really quick about the CGI because not just with her and Tarkin, but I think on the whole it's very good. Yeah. Like I think like in particular, like the shots of like the Death Star are really good. Mm-hmm. I think all the stuff on Scarif is really impressive.
Yeah.
But my main issue is with, like, I think if there's one big criticism I have, it's that all the Tarkin stuff is so stupid.
It's
like,
the dumbest.
It's not necessary. I think like the use of that CGI is like just flagrantly bad. Like, and. Like, I remember when it first came out, seeing it for the first time going, it's not bad.
Yeah.
You know, like, but as each year passes and I see it again, I'm like, oof.
Yeah.
And I think what upsets me is that, like, it doesn't upset me, but, like, what's annoying is you could see very clearly where they could have fixed it.
Yes.
Insofar as it opens with Tarkin, like, in the dark. Right?
Yes.
He's like in the shadow, he's facing away.
Yes.
And you could have just kept it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just had him facing away, like in the dark, you know, and we would have gone, oh, that's Tarkin.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But we never would have had that moment where we're like, whoa.
Whoa, boy.
Because I think really once he steps into like the light and you really, there's like long sequences of him talking, you're like, I hate it. Like it's just really upsetting. Like,
it is
not good.
Yeah, and also it just like I know kind of why they had to include Tarkin because like he was like in charge of the whole Death Star operations in the original trilogy because like you said earlier, we never see any of these characters again. Like Krennic never comes up anywhere else.
Right.
And so they had to like make sure that we knew like here's where the transfer of power happened and here's who it went to, so that we can kind of
put the pieces together.
But I'm with you. I think they could have just kept him, you know, facing, because he just seems like that kind of guy that would not face you directly because he thinks he's better than you and that you don't deserve like his time of day or whatever.
Right.
And so I think it would have been totally in character for him to just be like looking out and not facing the guy. Yeah,
and I think even like there's that second scene where they're together where he like takes control of the Death Star from him.
Yes.
I feel like you could have even had like Krennic be on another planet.
Yeah.
And Tarkin like, you know, do a holo message or whatever. Yeah. Because it's like we would have gotten the same thing, but you could have hid the CGI a little bit better.
Right.
And I'm not doing this to like dismiss the hard work that I'm sure the CGI, you know, the team put into it, because that I've done a little bit of that stuff and it's incredibly hard. And it's like, you know, I don't want to put away their hard work, but the problem is that your brain is always going to be able to detect it, right? Yes. And the more you focus on it, the like harder your brain's going to have to work to like, and it's just like, it's just upsetting. It's like the Leia bit at the end, I also hate, but I don't hate it as much because it's so quick, you know, and it's like, but it's just the Tarkin stuff just really bothers me. I just don't like it.
And I think the Leia might have been a little better than the Tarkin, because anytime I would like he would pop up on screen, I don't know what the hell's going on, but like one side of his face like almost looked and it kind of looked like it was clipping a little bit. I'm like, what in the hell? But then when Leia shows up, I'm like, okay, that actually looks pretty good. It
looks decent.
Right, and they don't have her move around a whole lot.
Yes.
Which I think is good.
It is good. And I think, like, spoiler alert, we even see it in, like, The Mandalorian when Luke shows up.
Yes.
And even in that, I don't like it. Like, it's just, I find it upsetting. It's just... I feel like I'm impressed by the technology.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm like, we don't need to do this. Like,
no
one wants this.
Yeah. It's cool to see Luke during that time.
It is cool.
But, yeah,
I don't know. It bothers me.
Yeah.
But,
the Darth Vader fight. Let's talk about that shit, because, oh my god.
The final...
in the fucking corridor.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I heard an argument one time from somebody that was like, that scene is dumb because you're supposed to be on like the side of the rebels, and then we have this like awesome moment with Vader at the end. Mm-hmm. But I don't see it that way so much. I see it is a bit of fan service, which like, whatever.
I'll take it.
But what I do like about it is it's the first time you see Vader as like force of nature. Like, just this like monster, that most of the rebellion is never going to encounter Darth Vader, right? Like, he's this myth, he's this legend, he's this like, shit, most of the stormtroopers are never going to see Darth Vader, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
The idea that he would rock up for this and just like
body everybody.
And they're not even like, they're barely trying to fight him. They're mostly trying to run away, because he's just terrifying.
Oh yeah. It is when I first saw that, right? Because they're all in this corridor, lights go out. They're like trying to get this door open because it's stuck. And then it gets quiet.
Yeah.
They like cut the music. It's quiet. And then you hear it. You hear the breathing. And out loud in the theater, I went, fuck. Right? Because I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And you see, the rebels also hear the breathing, and they're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And so they get ready. Right? And they're sitting there, and they did such a good job of like holding suspense for just the right amount of time, because it's dark. Shots of rebels sweating bullets, and then he ignites his lightsaber, and you're like, well, nice knowing you guys.
Yeah. And what I love too about that moment is there's that moment where they're like, the rebels are holding, and as soon as the lightsaber lights up, the one guy at the back's like, no, let me out.
Yep. And I agree. It's because in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, right? We know that Anakin slaughtered all those children,
right,
and he did just the most atrocious things imaginable.
Yeah.
But we don't ever like see it, right? Yeah. There's that like holograph that Obi-Wan kind of watches,
right,
and we kind of get glimpses of it, but we never see anything like happen. This, and I know why they didn't show it. It's because like if they showed like some dude just massacring a bunch of children, that wouldn't have been received very well. So they kind of just had to hint at it.
Yeah.
But with this, it's the first time we see Vader really just unload.
Yeah.
On some people.
Just going nuts.
Right. Because in like the original trilogy, it was the 70s, and the choreography wasn't too great. I think one of the greatest fights is between Luke and Vader in episode 6. But again, it's the 70s. They didn't have what we have today. And so yes, he was a bad guy, but we don't see him like really unload on some people.
Right.
This was the first time, and it was brutal. Like, there was no reason for him to just like hold that guy on the ceiling for a little bit while he's blocking shots and then cut him in half. No reason for that. No. He could have just killed him right there. Yeah. But no. Well, one, it's Anakin, right? Flair for the dramatic as always. But also he's just like a bad dude.
Yeah. I like the characterization of Vader. We only get 2 scenes with him, but in this one where he's kind of just a dick. Like, there's and a lot of people like have thrown, criticism at it, but there's that little moment where he's choking Krennic. Yeah. And tells him, don't choke on your aspirations. Yep. And people are like, oh, that's like dumb. That's not very Vader. But it's like, it's a little bit Vader.
It's a little bit.
he's like that. You know, he's a dick.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, think about episode 4 where they're having that like meeting in that meeting room, and that one jackass is like saying something, and Vader just starts choking him for no fucking reason and kills him.
Yeah.
Right? And then he's like, anybody else want to talk shit? Right? I think it's very on brand for him to be like, don't choke on your aspirations, you stupid bitch.
And I think something that Star Wars fans forget, and sorry, Star Wars fans, but you guys suck sometimes.
Yeah.
One of the things I think Star Wars fans forget is that, like, Star Wars has always been and always will be, like, riddled with, like, goofy humor.
Yeah.
And that's just George Lucas's, like, because he's, like, if you see interviews with him, he's very funny.
Yeah.
And he's, like, he's funny, but in, like, a very quiet, like, very weird way.
Yeah.
And I feel like the way he writes jokes in the original trilogy is, like, just him. Like, just the way he... Like, there's a great joke, I think it's in episode 5, where there's, like, 2 Imperial officers, and they're, like, talking to Vader over the comms or whatever. And one of them says something, and Vader just starts choking him, and he has to, like, step behind and go...
Yep. Yep.
And the other guy's like, like, you know, whatever. And it's so funny, like... And you get the sense that Vader's, like, he's just a little... Like, that's just him having fun, you know? And... In this movie, I get the same, that, like, George Lucas would have seen that joke and been like,
nice.
You know,
good one.
That's pretty funny, you know, like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think Star Wars fans need to lighten up in general. Like,
they just need to. There's a big old stick right up their keister that they just have to, like,
just pull it out,
remove it.
Yeah, and not all Star Wars fans.
Oh no.
I'm married to one, and she's, you know, she's very cool. Like, she likes most things, you know, but it's just like. I've just met some Star Wars fans that just need to chill. Yeah. Man, just chill.
You're up here.
Yeah.
Right? Bring it down
just bring it down a notch, you know?
It's not that serious.
It's not that serious.
It's a silly, goofy movie.
It is. It's about space wizards. Like, it's not...
Yeah, like, come on.
Come on. It's not that serious. But, anything else you want to say about the movie?
Since this is an action podcast, the action in this is really, really well done.
Yes.
It's so good, and it's well choreographed, and like all the stuff on Scarif with the rebels, it's very clear that they, you know, they wanted to show that this, like, one, and we've said this the entire podcast, but this is a war, and people were dying, right?
Yes.
And it was a scrappy fight, because these rebels, they're not trained.
Right.
They're just dudes, right? And women just trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so they're, you know, taking cover behind whatever, they're fighting scrappy, and they're taking hits.
Yeah.
And so I think the, like, combat choreography really well done.
Yeah.
And then anytime we see, like, hand-to-hand stuff, which is mainly with Turret, also really well done.
Yeah.
Partly because he's, like, a trained martial artist.
Yeah.
But also just, like, it's good.
Yeah.
Right?
The first time I saw this movie, I remember thinking in the theater, like, when are they going to do, like, when's Donnie Yen going to have his moment? You know, because it's like, you don't hire him to just stand around.
Right.
You know, like,
you hire him to hit a dude.
A guy of that caliber is just like, you know, he's like, you know, to like martial arts fans, he's like Jesus. You know, he's like, you know, you can't just put him in a movie and just have him stand there.
Right.
So I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, what's he going to do? Where's the moment, you know? And that moment where, like, he walks into the center of all those stormtroopers, I was like, oh, there it is.
Yep, that's it.
Because the camera even pulls back, it goes wide, and it's just like, just let him go.
Yep. It's like a little top.
He just, vroom, you know. Yeah, you're right. The hand-to-hand stuff's really good. And they do a good job in this movie, too, of, like, when the action is unfolding, especially on Scarif, they cut back and forth enough that you don't get lost as to, like, where everything is.
Yes.
And I remember I was watching it, I think it was last year. I had the thought of, like Star Wars doesn't do, like, orchestral music, right? Like, they're never going to put, like, a pop song in, like, a Star Wars movie.
Imagine, like, a Wiz Khalifa song in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, because it would throw you out, you know? Like, but I always wish that, like, during the like Scarif battle, they had put in Fortunate Son.
Oh yeah.
You know, while they're like landing on the beach.
Yeah.
You know, like they're like coming in for ground landing, and it's all bear down.
Yep.
Dare dare.
Yeah.
They didn't do that, but I always thought that would be funny.
So good.
Because I do love the stuff on Scarif where like you see the troops like being reinforced, and you see like. And what I like about that fight too is, especially at the start of it, where they're all kind of in the one ship and they're like waiting to go out there. You see them like there's a mood, you know, where it's like they all kind of know they're gonna die, but they're not gonna say it. You know, they're just like, maybe we'll get out of here. You know, but more than likely we're all gonna die.
Yeah. Well, and it's like they were, I think, really taking to heart what Jin told them before they got there, which was like essentially like, you know, we'll do the first thing and then we'll do the next thing and we'll keep going until we win or not. Right. And so I think they were like, it was clear to them that like, oh yeah, there's a good chance that we're not getting out of here,
right,
but we're not going to say it because we're just going to focus on this first thing, right? We're laying all the charges and then we're going to blow all the charges and then we're going to fight some people. And we're just going to keep going until we get to the part where either we win or we lose.
Yeah.
So.
Excuse me.
Your excuse.
Oh my god. Oh my word. I'm burpy today.
Yeah.
I'm like a little baby.
There you go.
I had a few miscellaneous final thoughts.
Yeah.
One of them is that I love that this movie kind of gives you the idea that like the Mon Calamari, like the, you know, the fish guys.
Oh yeah.
You know, like Admiral Akbar.
Yes.
You get the sense that they're like the hot shots of like the Rebel Alliance, you know? Because with Admiral Akbar in episode 6, you know, he's the one who's like, it's a trap, you know, like, and in this one, Admiral Raddus is the one that's like, let's go fuck him up.
Yeah,
like, let's just go in, let's go get him.
Guns blazing.
And everyone else is like, chill, Raddus, like, you know, whatever.
I love his plan to use one of those fucking Hammerhead Corvettes to just like body a Star Destroyer. Oh my god.
That is one of my favorite moments in the movie, and you just reminded me. The moment where he's like, fucking get him. Like, And, oh man, I love some of the... So that leads me into my next point, which is that I think the creature design in this one is kind of at the best it's been for Star Wars in a while. And one of the things I love, and I love it in every Star Wars movie, I just love me some little guys. I love the little guys.
Yes.
There's 3 little guys in this.
3 of them. Yep.
There's the one who's with he's with Saw's troops.
Yes.
And he's like he's got like a little beard.
Yep.
And he's like, you know, he's like, you know.
Yep.
And then
he's great.
One actually gets a name. His name's Pow.
Oh yeah.
And he's the one he lands with Jin and I almost called him Donnie, Chirrut and Baze. And he's like, you know.
He jumps out and he's like,
yeah.
The gun's like as big as him.
He's like a little lizard man. But my favorite one, he's my favorite little guy in all of Star Wars. He's on the ship and he's got the turret.
Oh yeah.
And it's like bigger than him, and he's like, you know.
Yep.
I love me some low guys.
Yep. I bet you, this is my headcanon, I bet you they had some other guy manning that, and he like looked at it and he just pushed that guy out of the way and took charge because he wanted to use that. And if anybody got close to him, he'd be like, no, fuck you.
I love the idea that the rebellion is just like, we'll take anybody. We don't care if you're 2 feet tall
or 10 feet tall. I don't give a fuck.
I just love anytime in Star Wars there's like a character who's completely impractical. Like, you know, like, I love the low guys, but like there's a guy in The Rise of Skywalker, which is a terrible movie, but there's a scene at the beginning where there's like a big slug man, and he's like, he has no arms, and I'm like, how does he do anything? You know, but he's like,
Yep. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the little guys because I didn't know where else to put it in. But.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I also love the little guys. I think they're a really great, brief comedic break from all the horrible war atrocities that are happening.
And I don't know, man. I read, there was an interview with Gareth Edwards who was one of the co-writers, and then he was also the director. And he talked about how they originally like didn't know if Disney would let them have a really grim ending.
Yeah.
You know, so they kind of wrote it like, oh, they all live at the end or whatever.
Right.
And I appreciate that Disney was like, nah, kill him.
Yep. Go
you know?
for it.
Because it does give you the idea that like the rebellion is like composed of a bunch of people who are willing to die for the cause. Mm-hmm. I just love it.
It's so good.
It's a good movie.
Mm-hmm. It's really good. The very beginning, I think, has one of my other favorite moments, and it's where Jin is being transported somewhere.
Yeah.
And the transport gets stopped by rebels. They bust in.
Oh yeah.
And she like kicks all their asses, runs out, jumps, and Kay is just there,
clotheslines
grabs her,
yeah,
and slams her on the ground and goes, "You are being rescued.
Yeah, congratulations, you are being rescued." Yeah.
Right. And you can tell that like that knocked the wind out of her. It was so because he didn't move. Mm-hmm. He just like she jumped, he grabbed, didn't move, on the ground.
Yep.
It was so funny.
And I want to... We didn't really talk about her that much, but I think Felicity Jones is great. I think.
Oh, she's wonderful.
I think she's a good lead. I think Jin is a very interesting character.
Yeah.
I feel like she doesn't get enough credit for being kind of the first female lead of a Star Wars movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, Rey kind of was in Force Awakens, but I think she doesn't get enough credit. I think she's great.
Yeah.
She carries that movie really well. Yep. I think you really get the feeling about like the weight she has on her shoulders.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people give shit to her for that line where she's like, "I'm a rebel. This is a rebellion, isn't it? I rebel." And it's like it was only in the trailer. It's not in the final movie, so it's fine.
It's whatever.
Yeah, I think she's great.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Props to her.
Yeah.
I hope she's in more stuff.
Oh, same. I think she's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars just because she's like, she doesn't give a shit. No. I mean, she won't put up with any shit either. Mm-hmm. Because like when they were trying to recruit her, she's like, no, fuck you. Like, what do I get out of this, right? And she was very hesitant at first. And yeah, well done, Felicity.
Yeah. And we didn't really talk about him either, but I think Mads Mikkelsen is really good as Galen.
Yes.
He's barely in it, but good performance.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's good in everything.
Yeah.
It's nice to see him playing a good guy for once.
Yeah. No, that's fair. There's I can't remember his fucking name. He was in The Rebel. But I didn't actually realize this because I hadn't watched it yet because I don't think it had come out. But he's the principal in Sex Education.
Oh, that guy. Yes. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he was great. And I didn't realize it until I watched it this time around. I was like, wait a minute. I know where he's from.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I didn't realize he'd done Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. So, I forgot about that guy.
Yeah.
He's a good guy, that guy.
He is.
But yeah, so that's the movie.
That is the movie.
Unless you have anything else you gotta...
No. I think this might be the last thing. I love the design of those troopers in the all black.
Oh, the Death Troopers.
Yeah. I love those guys. Yes. They're so cool.
And I love their voice. Like their scrambled, like comms. Yeah. Because it makes them very scary.
Oh, it makes them absolutely fucking terrifying.
They don't really do anything in this movie. They just kind of stand there. But
they're really cool. I want more of them.
Yes, they're very good. Yeah. And they're fun if you've ever played Star Wars Battlefront.
Oh,
they're in the second one.
Okay.
They're a lot of fun to play in that, but they're great.
Yeah.
A good design, like you said. Just the sleek helmet, like almost like pinched cheeks, like.
And the all black.
All black. They're almost alien. Like they're very like. When I first watched it, I thought maybe they were like they were like some sort of tall humanoid alien or something, but. I think they are supposed to just be regular stormtroopers, but just that voice scrambler.
Yep.
They're great.
They're wonderful.
One thing this will be the last thing, but I was thinking about it when I was watching it. I like that this movie and The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett have all done a good job of establishing that like there are other like languages and cultures in Star Wars that dominate the galaxy besides like humans and English.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just was thinking about this, but I like that like There's that one guy who he's the one who takes Bodhi into captivity. He's got like the weird face. Yeah. I like that he is speaking Hadith.
Yes.
I don't know why. I enjoy that. Like I like that there's other like major languages. Like it adds this like layer of like, you know, like there's standard English, but then there's also like you might speak Hadith or you might speak Twi'lek or you might speak whatever. Like it adds like a bigger like it makes the
flavor.
It adds flavor. It makes the galaxy feel lived in.
Yeah.
And I like that like in Book of Boba Fett, like, you know, they make like the Tusken Raiders out to be like a culture. Yeah. You know, I love stuff like that where they so like good. Give it this extra like
give it life.
Just a little, you know, just a little kith.
Yeah. No, it's I totally agree. I love that part with the Tusken Raiders because they're painted as like this like violent group of people that just will like kill on sight. Yeah. And to some degree kind of, but they're a species, right? They have communities, they have families, all this kind of stuff. And so I think Book of Boba Fett did a really good job of like humanizing them and giving them life. Yeah. And one thing we didn't talk about that I keep saying this is going to be the last thing. I think the music is really good in this. Oh, I think it's very different from the John Williams score. Yeah, but I think that's to its benefit. Like I love the music, like when they're on Jeddah, and it's that like almost sounds like a what's the name of that instrument? You hear it a lot in like Indian music. Oh like, yeah. You know that almost like I can't remember what the name of the instrument is, but it's that like zing, like, almost like a steel guitar. Yes,
like, yeah, I love so the music, and I think it does a good job of making you feel like Star Wars without like copying it too much.
Yeah, it makes it unique.
Yeah, so we've arrived at the end.
Yes, we have.
The tensest moment of the show.
Yeah.
What would you rate it out of 10?
As a movie, forgetting that it's Star Wars, I'm gonna say 8.9 out of 10.
Ooh, okay.
8.9 out of 10. As a Star Wars, bringing in the Star Wars context, 9.1 out of 10.
Ooh. All right. I'm going to say, just for both, I'm going to just say 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10?
Yeah. Okay. There's very little I don't like, and I think that the stuff I don't like isn't bad enough to detract from the overall like feeling.
Yes.
I guess.
I agree.
That might get me in some hot water with that guy who got mad at me for taking a point away from Triple R, but
well, whatever.
But that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, my average is also the same as your score, so
yeah, it's just I don't know. Everything in this movie works for me.
It does.
I love it. And I love you.
I love you.
And we're gonna go make out now.
Yep.
Whoops. Okay. So that's the show.
Yeah, it is.
So thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, go ahead and leave us a nice review. How many stars should they rate us?
Well, like we said at the very beginning, I think the best course of action for any rating is always giving it the most.
The most.
So for us, personally, this is my opinion, 5. 5 stars. A like, a thumbs up.
Agreed.
I think that's
fair. And then you can do it right in your app if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you have something you would like to tell us or send us a recommendation, you can email us at vivalaaction@gmail.com. If you would like to get in contact with us on Instagram or Facebook, we are at Viva La Action, and on Twitter we are at Action Viva. But you can find Grayson rummaging around in the trash.
Yep.
And you'll find me floating through the cold, dead vacuum of space.
Excellent.
That's the episode. Bye.
Bye.